Welcome back to the Lit Hit. Over the next week or so, we will release videos of roughly 2 minutes explaining Ozymandias by Shelley line by line. Poems were written to be read and read in full. They were not written to be analysed by hundreds of cooped up, smelly 15 and 16-year-olds in a stuffy hall in mid-May. Nor were they written to be savagely ripped apart line by line and forced into the confines of a 2-minute YouTube video. But unfortunately, life is unfair, and you do have to analyse it on a tiny desk next summer, surrounded by hundreds of other Year 11s seeping in sweat. So we're going to do it anyway. I will, however, take the liberty of reading the poem in full in this first video at least. Ozymandias by Percy Shelley. I met a traveller from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear, My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains, round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away." Back in the days when FIFA wasn't an option, well-to-do blokes used to battle it out with a sonnet tournament during their free time. And it was an occasion such as this when Shelley and his friend Horace Smith decided to see who could write the best poem. The subject, Ozymandias, is taken from a description by the classical writer Diodorus Siculus of the Theban monuments of Ramesses II, who ruled Egypt for 67 years from 1279 to 1213 BC. Ozymandias is a poem that showcases how even the mightiest despots, tyrants, are annihilated by time. Omnipotent figures are reduced to ruined statues. This is the inevitable fate of the powerful, according to Shelley. The short vowel sound "a" recurs throughout the poem as a whole, and here the assonance immediately resonates. I met a traveller from an antique land. It's a short, cutting sound, and its brevity echoes the transience of the great empires Shelley sought to depict. It is vitally important that the perspective changes in the first line, from the first-person pronoun I to the traveller and his retelling of his experiences. We are immediately twice removed from the subject of the work, Ozymandias, and later in line 6 we will see that we are a third time removed as the sculptor who crafted the statue is introduced, and later still in line 10 when we are a fourth time detached with the introduction of the king himself, Ozymandias. William Bash says, "The finished poem relies on a number of reconstructions. The sculptor constructed Ozymandias, the traveller constructed the body of the king lost in the sand, the poet constructed or organised or presented a pattern for us." Can you see how these stages challenge the level of tangibility? So the perspective shift at the beginning serves as a structural message. The diminished credibility of the account is itself an indication of Ozymandias' legacy and fate, i.e. one that will become obscured with time, diminished, obliterated, annihilated. This mysterious traveller from an antique land then. He's the subject of much debate. Shelley never saw the statue himself, and it's speculated that he may have consulted a London periodical called The Traveller. Regardless, the name is vague. This opening is devoid of orientation. In its implicit brilliance, the reader is afforded no precise time or place. In fact, this first line is bare, both in its sound and its language. The taut linguistic construction in the poem as a whole beautifully implies a moral undertone, but by no means enforces its didactic message. So could Shelley be suggesting that his artistic power in the creation of this poem is greater than that of a powerful tyrant who explicitly commands, "Look on my works"? The vagueness of the speaker's persona, and indeed the traveller he meets, is largely irrelevant in understanding the central irony of the poem. the Ozymandias inscription is laughably different to the shattered visage that now remains. But there exists a structural juxtaposition that will form the basis of the poem, and it's grounded here in the relationship between the I, who I think we should not assume as Shelley, and the traveller who imparts some wisdom, i.e. the remainder of the poem. The sculptor, who obeys the cold command to immortalise Ozymandias, imparts his wisdom in teaching the king a lesson. Ramesses does ultimately end up as a colossal wreck, doesn't he? Are we to assume then that the traveller is using the story as a means of teaching this speaker, the I at the beginning of the poem, perhaps a young, vain proponent of the Western Industrial Revolution, a lesson? Shelley was, after all, a radical political activist opposed to the injustices of capitalism. That's the first line then. If you liked this video, please subscribe below.